Well, thank you very much, Margarese. Thank you for the introduction. I feel the burden of the responsibility of speaking to this vibrant audience after your introduction. I'm not a pollster. I do not know much about the results of elections, but of course I'm ready to talk to you and to discuss some issues and of course to answer questions after my presentation. I have first of all to thank Margarese Correia for organizing this big event. It's the first time I come here to take part in such an event and to visit this area of California. I've been in San Francisco and Los Angeles and San Diego as ambassador of Brazil a few times, but it's the first time that I come to this very important region. And it's thanks to you that I'm here today, because I received the invitation through the Consul General of Brazil, Eduardo Prisco, who's a good friend of mine, and he's in Brazil right now. That's why he's not here today. And he told me that he was present to the two previous events, 2 previous years. And he convinced me very quickly that I should be here today. And I would like to tell you all that during the last 2 days, I've met with many business people, entrepreneurs, innovators, and with Margarese and part of the board of BayBrazil, and I was absolutely sure that I could not have missed this occasion to come and to attend. I'm not a specialist in the area. I do not know much about IT and technology of communications and all the issues that were discussed right now and will be discussed in the afternoon. I could not have taken part in the previous panel, and I would not be able to answer most of the questions. But so I will not be able to give you any information or to tell you anything you don't know about technology in Brazil. The only thing I can do is I bring two messages that I think are important and 2 messages that have to do with the event, although they are not directly connected with science and technology. First of all is that Brazil and the United States have very important relations. Both countries are very important one to the other. Brazil has developed over almost 200 years. We'll be celebrating 200 years of bilateral relations in 8 years from now. We have developed very important and strong ties with the United States. We are very important trade partners. Brazil and the United States have a trade of $75 billion a year. This is the 2nd largest trade partner for Brazil and the 8th largest trade partner for the United States. We are in a position very close with France and UK, so it's individually as countries, of course, not considering the bloc, the European Union, it's a very important trade relation. But relations not only trade, we have a very important and intense relation in the investment area. We do have very huge investments, American investments in Brazil. The United States is the first investor in Brazil with over $100 billion, $128 billion of stock of capital invested in Brazil. But Brazil, over the last 10 to 12 years, also became a very important investor in the United States. We have, as of today, very important companies in the United States, which are the capital is controlled by Brazilian companies, or which has a very important component of Brazilian capital in the company. I just mentioned in a few. You have Embraer, the 3rd largest aircraft manufacturer in the world, with important installation in the United States, in Florida and other states. You have also JBS Friboi, which is one of the largest beef producers in the world. It has something like 20% of the US market in animal protein. and so many others, Beer, and Anheuser-Busch, and so many, Burger King, and so many other companies. This is a very important relation, although the United States has a much larger investment in Brazil. It's very important because Brazilian investments in the United States help keep around 110,000 jobs in the United States. So this is a very important relation from the economic point of view. But also on the political side, it's very important. As I mentioned, the United States and Brazil have a long-standing history of bilateral diplomatic relations. And the United States was the first country in the world to recognize the independence of Brazil, which took place in 1822. And we have been working together with the United States in different arenas and different fora, such as the United Nations, World Trade Organization, Organization of American States, all the multilateral structure of world governance. We have been working together, and we have, on many issues, a similar or very close position. And of course, also on our bilateral relations, we do have a huge number of bilateral mechanisms of consultation, which are extremely important and which cover all areas of our bilateral relations, from science and technology and education, to financing, to trade, political consultation, and so on. We have almost 30 bilateral dialogues or mechanisms of consultation, which you find only in some countries which are very big and which have very intense relations with the United States. We do have, I just would like to mention, one of these mechanisms, which is very interesting and very special, and the United States, as far as I know, the United States has this kind of mechanism with very few countries, with Canada and Mexico, members of NAFTA, but also with China and India, which is the CEO Forum. This is a very interesting mechanism. It puts together 12 big CEOs from the largest companies in the United States and 12 from Brazil, not from the same sector, and 4 high officials from each country, 2 from Brazil and 2 from the United States. In our case, from Brazil is the Chief of Cabinet to the President and the Minister of Industry and Trade. And on the US side is the Chief Economic Advisor to the White House and the Secretary of Commerce. And this is the right occasion to discuss issues of great interest, direct interest for both countries and for both private sectors and for businessmen. And out of these conversations, we have had already 9 or 10 meetings. This mechanism meets once, sometimes twice a year. And the results are great, are fantastic. I think that a lot of synergy has come out of this mechanism, and we met once in Colorado at National Renewable Laboratory close to Denver, and this meeting resulted in a lot of partnerships and a lot of joint actions from both countries, in both private sector. But and the second message I would like to bring to you, this has to do with this event, is that for the Brazilian government, the scientific and technological development and the promotion of innovation is absolutely strategic, and it's a top priority. The government is totally engaged in speeding up the development in these areas so that more wealth can be generated and can benefit the population. So it's a great pleasure to be in an event like this today. And this is the second message, and a number of other speakers will have the floor today. One of them being Virgilio Almeida, who's a good friend, and the Secretary for IT at the Ministry of Science and Technology and Innovation. It's important to note that the ministry is also in charge of innovation and promotion of innovation. And other speakers will have, of course, more information and precise information, but I just would like to mention a few initiatives of the Brazilian government with relation to the development of scientific and technological development and promotion of innovation. I've been, as I mentioned, 2 days here meeting in this area, and I was surprised to learn about the importance of the Brazilian market for IT companies. The number of users and consumers of products and services from IT companies has been expanding rapidly. And for example, I recently learned that a record number of almost 620,000 tweets were sent per minute during the final game of the World Cup, almost twice as many as the 390,000 tweets sent per minute during the 2014 Super Bowl. And furthermore, from June 12 to July 13th, which is the period of the World Cup in Brazil, 350 million people worldwide generated 3 billion World Cup posts, comments, and likes on Facebook. I am sure that this will be discussed in the next panel with representatives from Nike and Visa when they analyze the digital media penetration during the World Cup. In order to expand access to these new forms of communication, Brazil has increased its investments in the information technology sector. One example has been the rapid growth, the rapid growing access to broadband services in the country, from 6.3% of the population in 2012 to 34% today. Mobile broadband is leading the expansion of internet access in the country, reaching 123 million users, a 63% increase compared to March 2013. The increase in the number of cellular phones in Brazil illustrates the country's potential for IT companies. In a country of 203 million inhabitants, there are 274 million cell phones as of April this year, or 135 cell phones per 100 inhabitants. And according to the National Regulatory Agency, Anatel, approximately 83% of the country's population lives in cities with at least 4 mobile service providers. One other important and recent example of the policies of the government on innovation and science and technology is IT Maior, a strategic program for the promotion of Brazilian software and information technology services. Today, with the IT industry in Brazil, the IT industry in Brazil exceeds $100 billion in sales and accounts for 4.4% of Brazil's GDP. And I heard from Virgilio that if you count also communications, this proportion of the GDP is a little over 7%. And the IT sector in Brazil is operated by more than 8,200 companies, some of which are represented here today. Of the companies involved in software development in Brazil, 94% are micro or small enterprises. Another initiative of the government, which was launched in 2013, is Inova Empresa, or Innovative Enterprise, to expand private sector innovation in different sectors, such as oil and gas, space, defense, sustainable development, and agriculture. These initiatives complement other important public programs, and such as FINEP, which is the financing agency for the system of scientific and technological development. FINEP has, in 2014, this year, a total amount of $4.4 billion in disbursements in financing to the sector. This is a big change because in 2001, this total was under $500 million. And as we are speaking now, the president of FINEP is meeting in the East Coast in Washington with a number of different agencies, U.S. agencies in the government, to learn more about the U.S. experience and look for better ways to reach more companies. I also would like to mention, and we have two representatives here from BNDES, which is the National Bank for Development, for Social and Economic Development. BNDES has been financing, of course, innovation and entrepreneurship, and this year alone, for the innovation area, they have a disbursement of approximately $2 billion. Another initiative I would like to mention is Startup Brazil. This program, Startup Brazil, aims to accelerate 150 startups in the software and IT services by the end of this year. The program builds a network of mentors and investors for promising entrepreneurs, collaborates with universities, research institutes, and incubators, and will help launch new innovative products and services. Startup Brazil is a promising opportunity for foreign investors, and we estimate that so far, around 25% of startups in Brazil have a significant international participation. Microsoft has recently announced an investment of more than $100 million in innovative startup companies in Recife, Rio de Janeiro, Salvador, and São Paulo. This important initiative will be a big contribution to the promotion of innovation in the country. At the same time, Google Brazil will be able, and I'm sure the representative, the CEO of Google in Brazil will be able to expand on this matter. Google is planning to establish a Google campus in the city of São Paulo, expected for the first months of 2015, which will act as an important incubator for startup companies. Another interesting initiative, they are experimenting the use of hot air balloons in northeast region of Brazil to offer Wi-Fi internet access. And yesterday I visited Google and I received a brief explanation about this project, which is being tested also in New Zealand. The government programs to foster innovation have provided the basis for the investment of innovative companies such as IBM, GE, DuPont, Google, Intel, Microsoft, and many others that increased their presence in Brazil in the last years. These companies are investing in Brazil not only because of its growing consumer market, but also because of the highly skilled professionals that can be strengthened, that can be found in Brazil, and that strengthen the company's capacity of production. Speaking of skilled professionals, I'd like, and this is my last remark, I'd like to mention another program which was launched by President Rousseff shortly after she took office, which is called in Portuguese Ciências Sem Fronteiras, or Science Without Borders. In English, we use a Science Mobility Program. And this is a very important program which was launched at the beginning of the government, and it has a duration of 4 years, and the goal is to send abroad 101,000 Brazilian students with full scholarship by the government specifically for the STEM area. We so far have had more than 70,000 scholarships worldwide granted, and we currently and currently there are almost 40,000 students enrolled in universities around the world. Those are the active scholarships. In the United States, there have been more than 30,000 Science Without Borders students, out of which there are approximately 14,000 currently enrolled. I do not need to explain how much a program of this magnitude will contribute to the future of Brazilian workforce and how important it is to partner with the US universities. As for the University of California system specifically, there have been more than 1,000 students enrolled, and currently we have 420 active scholarships. So, and also another important aspect of this program is that it comprises summer internship in very important companies for the students that come with this full scholarship from the Brazilian government. And the program has counted on the support of numerous US companies such as NASA, Boeing, AbbVie, GE, Pfizer, Rockwell, Raytheon, DuPont, Cargill, Amgen, and many others. And yesterday, in all my meetings with companies, I mentioned this possibility, and all companies were very open and very interested in receiving Brazilian students. So these are the main issues that I would like to cover with you. As I said, I came with two messages, one about the importance of our relations and the other about the strategic approach that the government has for the area of scientific and technological development and promotion of innovation. And that's the reason I'm here, and I'm very glad and very honored to be here today speaking to such a vibrant audience. And I thank you very much, BayBrazil and Margarese. I do not deserve the invitation because I'm not a scientist, but I'm very glad to be here and to witness this, this event and the enthusiasm of the audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. So I would like to invite the ambassador to take a seat and invite here Lígia Aguilar. She is a tech reporter with Estado de São Paulo, is one of the major Brazilian newspaper. So Lígia is going to be asking some questions, and then she's going to open up to your questions. Thank you.
Well, hello. It's a pleasure to be here in Stanford, and also an honor to be here with you, Ambassador. I'm very impressed to see the interest in Brazil right now coming here. I was wondering, what do you think has brought this interest in Brazil? And also you mentioned some programs from the government like Startup Brazil that is helping to boost the startup scene in Brazil. So when it comes to innovation, what do you think it's the role Brazil can have as well?
Well, the big interest for Brazil in the United States is a consequence of our long-standing relations. Brazil has always been, as I mentioned before, a strong partner. Thank you. A strong partner of the United States in so many areas, and a very important market for U.S. companies. You just have to check and see that there are many, many companies, American companies, which have been in Brazil for over 1 century, such as GE and many others in the automobile sector, in the energy sector. It's not working? It's okay? And so I think that the size of the country, the size of the market, and also the similarities between the two societies. Brazil and the United States have more or less the same origins. We were both colonies of European metropolis, and we are very large and very big multi-ethnic and multicultural societies. It's much easier to make business and to understand and to have the interaction, very close interactions with people that you understand better, although you speak different languages. But I think that our our cultural pattern is much more similar. And the similarities between the two countries and the size of the economies and the big interest that Brazil has always had in the relations with the United States. We have also to mention that the United States and Brazil are the two largest countries in the continent, the largest economies, the United States the largest in the world, and Brazil the second largest in the continent, the Western Hemisphere, as it's called here. And also that we are very open societies and democratic societies. So I think that this generates a lot of interest. And the contribution of Brazil, as was said here during the first panel, Brazilians are very open to innovation and to new technologies. And I'm amazed, I think sometimes I'm a Jurassic because the speed of the innovations and the new technologies, it's very difficult for someone like me to keep up with all that. And I'm ashamed to say that maybe half of it is unknown totally for me. I've always worked, I'm a career diplomat. It's been my only job, my only work. So I started at a very early age, and I concentrate in this political and social area. So I'm not the best example for a person with a good interaction with high technology. But I think that the Brazilian society is very open and very interested in all the innovation, all the new products. They are so well received in Brazil.
Very interesting. As Margaret said, we have a change in the political scenario this year. We had something unexpected, that was the death of Eduardo Campos, one of the candidates, and it changed a lot the expectations about the elections this year. How does it affect the investments in Brazil, and what can we say about the expectations for the elections?
Well, expectations for the elections, I'm not a pollster, I cannot tell you what's going to happen. I think that, the President Rousseff is very well placed. I just saw a poll this morning. She's 8 points above the second place candidate, who is Marina Silva. And of course, there was a big change in the whole campaign and the whole ambience and the whole atmosphere in Brazil with this tragic accident which took the life of this young politician who was a member of the House of Representatives, a minister of science and technology in President Lula's government, and also twice governor of his home state, Pernambuco. And of course, it was a big emotion, and a lot of things changed, but I cannot tell you more than that. We're following with great attention. Elections will take place in the first round is the 5th of October, and the runoff is 26th of October. If none of the candidates reach 50% of valid votes, there's a runoff. And this is something that has a lot to do with this discussion today. Elections in Brazil, they are totally automatic. You vote on computers. It's electronic voting system with 143 million voters. And vote is mandatory in Brazil. So you have some 85% of this big amount, and the government, through the judiciary branch, has developed a very important and very comprehensive system of electronic voting, which reaches all areas of the country, even in more remote areas in Amazon. With the support of the state, the voting machines get there, and everybody has, all the 143 million voters can exercise their right. And the other part of the question, I forgot, because you started asking me about.
That's just the impact it will have about the investment as well.
In the future or in the programs of the government, none, of course. If President Rousseff is reelected, all the programs will continue, and if she's not elected, if another candidate gets the presidency, of course, Brazil is a very open and democratic country, and the conditions of investments and the rules will not change, and the priority will not change. I had the occasion yesterday of saying that Science Without Borders program is a huge program, and I'm sure whoever comes to the presidency will keep this program and will increase it and will make it more comprehensive, because it's something that's in the conscience of the Brazilian population and the government, that education is fundamental and is a top priority.
Thank you. Ambassador, we had a difficult time last year in diplomacy with Snowden's revelations. It changed a little bit the relationship between Brazil and the United States, so I would like to know how it has affected the relationship and how is it going on now?
It hasn't changed. It was, of course, a big surprise. The revelations shocked Brazil and Brazilian public opinion and the government. But as I mentioned before, we have a very open and transparent dialogue with the United States. And we have so many different channels of communications. As I mentioned also, all the different dialogues, the bilateral dialogues of consultation in many different areas. And this is very important because we can take every issue has a special mechanism of consultation, and this avoids the contamination of the relation as a whole with a very specific issue that would block everything. You may argue, well, but that was very important. The president didn't come to the United States on a state visit. It's true. She talked many times with President Obama, 2 or 3 times on the phone, and they met in St. Petersburg on the margins of the G20 meeting. And they both decided to postpone, not to cancel. A lot of people in the press always speak of canceling the visit. It was not canceled. It was postponed to a better moment, because all the revelations, which were very strong. It was a shock for Brazil, but for many other countries, for Germany and so many others, Mexico. And of course, the government was involved in the analysis and the assessing the extent of this, the US government. And we didn't want this to lose this occasion of a very important visit, of a state visit, to be lost. And of course, the focus, especially the press and the public opinion, would be on the NSA revelations. And we would have lost the occasion to discuss very, very important issues that we have bilaterally, especially in the area of science and technology, one of them being in the area of space cooperation and satellite launching. So, and we would also lose the occasion to send a message to the public opinion about the importance of our bilateral relationship in terms of trade, investment, and so on. So what we did is that since August or September last year, we started talking with the US government about the specifics of the NSA revelations, and we are still talking about this. But I must tell you that all the bilateral relations advanced very well during this period. We had a number of missions in coming to the United States from different areas, from defense and from many others. I had not long ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago, the visit of the commander of the Brazilian Air Force, and the commander of the Navy will be arriving tomorrow in Washington for a full week of meetings. And of course, also involving a lot of bilateral cooperation in this area, the area of defense, and so many different visitors and high-level visitors. We also received in Brazil a number of Secretary Kerry went twice to Brazil, Vice President Biden went twice last year and this year, but once after the NSA revelation. So we had business as usual situation. We are still waiting to solve the bilateral issues raised by the NSA revelations, which will come with time, and the invitation for President Rousseff is valid. It's a standing invitation. I'm sure she has already said that she has great interest in coming to the United States on a state visit when she will be able to focus with President Obama on the important bilateral issues.
Okay. These revelations also made Marco Civil be approved in Brazil and put Brazil on the leadership when it comes to the governance of the internet. But I know there are a lot of questions about Marco Civil. I'm sure Virgilio will be able to clarify them. But what is the importance of this leading role for Brazil?
Virgilio Almeida, the Secretary of the Ministry of Science and Technology and Innovation, of course, is much more qualified. He's an expert in this area, and besides that, he's responsible for the organism of internet in Brazil. He's I don't know in English, but he'll be able to Comitê Gestor da Internet Steering Committee, which is one of the big responsibilities he has in his area, and he's the person to answer to all those questions. But it's very important. I think the Marco Civil, the civil framework for internet, shows the importance of internet and social medias in Brazil and the Brazilian society. It also shows the importance that the government attaches to it, and also it stressed the transparency and an openness of the Brazilian society. Another very important aspect, another very important initiative, is that as a consequence of the NSA revelation, Brazil was able to promote a very important meeting, Net Mundial meeting in São Paulo this year in April, if I'm not mistaken, which was also a step forward in this area. And this was announced by President Rousseff last year at the opening of the United Nations General Assembly, which took place in September. And she's coming again to the United States this year on the 23rd and 24th of September in New York for the opening of the 69th Annual Assembly of the United Nations. And she had last year a very strong message about this, and when she announced the Net Mundial, and she will also have an important statement this year on this issue, and everybody listens to this message because traditionally, since the first General Assembly, Brazil is the first country to speak. So it's when all attentions are turned on this event, and shortly after is the U.S. President Obama will speak too. So it's a very important occasion for bringing a message from Brazil.
We recently had the news about the creation of the new development bank, the BRICS Bank. And I want to know what kind of opportunity does it bring to Brazil and what role Brazil can have on that. Also, what do you think it says about the development of the group, the BRICS?
Well, the BRICS is a very important consultation group. It puts together countries that are very similar in size, in population. Of course, India and China much bigger, but in geographic dimensions, and societies that have a lot in common. The new development bank is a very, very important initiative and one of the most strong decisions taken by this group. And this is the proof that the group is important. The group has a lot of potentialities, and the group can offer an important number of solutions to problems in the world. The new development bank will have total capital of $100 billion, and this is, of course, you can lend much more than that. This is the initial capital, and it's complementary to the other existing financial mechanisms such as the World Bank and IDB, Inter-American Development Bank, and so many, Asian Bank, African Development Bank. It's very important to count on alternatives and good alternatives, and this is additional to what exists. And there was also a very important decision which was taken at the same moment, which is the contingent reserve agreement, which is all the 5 big countries will put aside a part of their reserves to finance balance of payment needs, not only from the BRICS countries, but also from other countries that can associate. This is also additional, it's complementary to the International Monetary Fund. This is the main role of IMF, but it's good to have additional possibilities and alternatives. And of course, this shows the weight of those countries, of the 5 BRIC countries, in the world governance. And that's why this group is also trying to have a stronger voice in the world governance, not only in a reformed United Nations General Security Council, but also in the IMF, in the Bretton Woods institutions, where the BRICS, as of today, as of the quotas are divided in a way that the BRICS countries, although they have huge reserves and they're big economic actors, have a reduced weight. Just to give you an idea, China has only in reserves much more than most of countries' GDP, most countries in the world. It's bigger than Brazil's, which is $2 trillion, 300 million billion dollars. But it's the 7th or the 8th economy. So only the reserves of Bank of China are much bigger than the GDP of most countries in the world. It would be, if you consider only the reserves, it would be the 3rd GDP in the world.
We're kind of short in time, so I would like to open to some questions if you have, to give you the opportunity.
And we're just going to pass the mic around, and I'll ask for you to speak a little closer to the... Yeah.
Do you have a question there?
The question is for you, Ambassador Vieira. On the subject of investment in Brazil and trade flows, it's a 2-part question, if you'll excuse me. The first is any comments on potential tax reform internally in Brazil? And the second is the status of negotiations of the U.S.-Brazil bilateral tax treaty to avoid double taxation.
Well, they're very similar. Tax reform, I can't say you much about that because it depends. It's not under my responsibility, of course, and the new governments, whether it is President Rousseff on a second term or a new president, it demands a lot of negotiation within the government. You need the support, the necessary support from different parties. We have a lot of parties in Brazil. It's not a bi-party, 2-party system, and you have to negotiate to have the support to change the legislation, tax legislation, a tax reform, a very comprehensive tax reform will be. It is difficult because it involves 3 levels of taxes, federal, state, and local taxes. It's not an easy task. A lot of things can be done in small pieces, in slices, and you can take some by decrees, by executive order. You can change some aspects, but it's very difficult. I'm not in a position to tell you whether it is the first priority of the government. There is no doubt that the government is concerned With taxes, of course, it's important to collect more, but it's also important to give incentives to areas which need it. And of course, one of the incentives is to lower taxes in many areas so that you can have a larger, bigger production and so on. But I'm not in a position, I don't have the authority to tell you much about that. The bilateral double taxation agreement is an old issue. I don't know if you have an idea about the age of this issue. The first, I discovered it when I got to Washington, because it's a constant question I'm asked. And I asked my colleagues to make a research and see when all that started. It started in 1936. It's rather old now. But we signed an agreement between Brazil and the United States, which was approved in Brazil by Congress, but was never approved in the United States by the US Congress. It's very important, of course, to have a double taxation agreement to reduce taxes and to, as an incentive to better business. But we do have a very different tax system in both countries. Again, it's very difficult because you have to change even the concept of taxation. And there are a number of different positions in both countries that are very solid and consolidated over the years. So it's not an easy task. But what I can tell you is that besides that, in the absence of a double taxation agreement, we have a lot of business between the two countries. We have a lot of interest from Brazilian companies in the United States and also from American companies in Brazil. In Washington, I received the visit of so many different CEOs and high officials from many private, from big companies in the private sector, and they all declared their interest in investing more and making more business in Brazil. Most of them mentioned Brazil as number 2 or number 3 country for their companies, for their respective companies. So I think that the overall atmosphere of business between the two countries is very good and big and important. Of course, there are some steps we can take that would make it even more productive and better. But again, it's not an easy question. We're working, and I mentioned the CEO forum. I avoided saying that one of their concerns is a double taxation agreement because I didn't want to incentive questions, so many questions on that, because I would need, of course, a tax expert and we would take a full day, would deserve a seminar of 1 or 2 days to explain all the intricacies and all the difficulties. But the CEO Forum has always had in its agenda the double taxation agreement.
Ambassador, thank you for your presence here. My company is an export management company, and my clients are typically Brazilian manufacturers exporting to the United States. And as you're aware, the manufacturing sector in Brazil has been experiencing some fairly serious difficulties over the past years, both in terms of the exchange rate and the famous custo Brasil. And I'm wondering, do you foresee politically and economically any incentives for the manufacturing sector or any possible changes that might benefit the manufacturing sector and the exporters in Brazil in the next couple of years?
Yes, of course. The government is interested, of course, in having a better atmosphere for business, and of course it's part of the concern of the government to take steps to reduce costs and take steps to make more money available for financing. This is, of course, we have, there's no doubt that we have a big interest in that. That's also a priority. Again, we had some difficulties and it's not only Brazil, but the whole world. I don't think that the world economy is in its best shape. But even though I just read this morning in the news, the Central Bank of Brazil released the new statistics for the month of July, and the economy grew in the month of July 1.5%, which is quite good. There are many issues, many steps that can and will be taken, I have no doubt. But of course, you have to take into account the world economy too. The question of exchange rate was very important, and in a way, the present exchange rate is much better than it was 3 years ago when it reached a very low standard when the exchange rate to the dollar was 1.6, 1.7. That imposed an extra cost to Brazilian exports. And also, the labor legislation in Brazil is very different from the one in the United States. It's much closer to the European model. And of course, the government wants to have big growth, to be able to distribute more to the society. Social inclusion programs are very important and are a fundamental part of the government's strategy. And I think that there is how could I phrase it? The government's totally interested in having more business, but of course we will not renounce the very important social goals that were reached over the past. I think, as I said, the results of the economy were not bad, and the month of July, and I think that the overall results by the end of the year will create a new momentum for changes and new changes in the new government.
I guess we have time for one more question.
Okay, here.
Anyone? Okay.
Hi, Master. Good morning. Thanks for your presence here. I'm the Chief of Operations of Startup Brazil program. And when it comes to that space, an issue on the diplomatic relations between U.S. and Brazil are always the visa issue. So there are lots of Brazilian entrepreneurs and developers willing to come here. And we've also been attracting lots of international entrepreneurs and companies to Brazil. And the visa issue always comes to us as a problem. There are several initiatives trying to face that problem, including the Startup Visa Initiative. And I'd like to hear your thoughts on that matter.
Yes, this is also another question that's always raised. Well, first of all, visa. Our policy concerning visas is that it's based on reciprocity. And we have been talking with the United States for over 1 year, 2 years now, but we had a period we haven't talked much over the last 6 months because we had other problems to solve with respect to visas, and again, the legislation has to be adapted. So, but we are negotiating with the United States the global entry program, which it's not really a negotiation. You accept the program, you join the program, and you implement it as it is. So this demands a lot of changes and adaptations from our side, which would benefit a very small number of people. It's something like 1,500 business people, but well, it's something. And on the visa called Visa Waiver Program, it's a much more complex negotiation because it requires changes and big changes in the law and criminal law and all different kinds of legislation in Brazil, even constitutional principles, some of them. It's a very difficult negotiation too, but we are working on that. Let's see what can be done. We have to be a little bit patient. But one good thing is that we have adopted the 10-year visa, which is much easier. You have a visa valid for 10 years for both sides. That's it's not the ideal, it's not the best situation, but I think that this is much more comfortable. And we'll continue to work on that. We are open to it, we're negotiating, but it demands a lot of technical discussions and legal initiatives and changing the legislations in many aspects.
My name is Pedro. I just have a compliment to Felipe's question. I'm Brazilian. I work for an American-based company, but often organize a bunch of events in Brazil, bringing American entrepreneurs, business founders, VCs to Brazil. And when touching on the point of reciprocity, right, of the visa, I think that the 10-year validation is great, but we still find a ton of issues towards even getting Americans down there because none of them really think that they need a visa to go to Brazil. So, right, so it's like it always comes as a surprise.
Yeah.
So touching on the very specific process of like reciprocity, I'd be curious to understand your opinion towards like, shouldn't we, as Brazil, at least bend over a little bit and just be flexible on the rules and actually allow Americans to just come without a visa? Like, why is it that we have reciprocity, and is there something that is being done to actually address this issue? Because a lot of the times it prevents this back and forth traveling in just a faster way that could foster a ton of innovation for our country, right, in Brazil.
No, I believe in reciprocity, and it's the position of the government too. You need it. And a large number of Americans go to Brazil, 250,000 or 300,000 every year. And they all, the problem is that, as you mentioned, most people do not know that they need a visa. They're surprised. But that's the reality. And Brazil is not the only country to demand visa from Americans. There are many others.
Oh, no, absolutely. But like you mentioned, you believe in reciprocity, right? So could you just help me understand why do you think reciprocity is actually important and a valid point?
Well, because when you or your family come from Brazil to the United States, they have to go through a visa process. And sometimes it's much better now, but sometimes it takes so long, it's so difficult. And on the other hand, we do have a lot of flexibility. Every day I receive calls and from friends or from people who need to go to Brazil or their company, they have to overnight send someone to Brazil to work and to it's the interest of the company. And we always do that. We always accept this, and we are flexible. We have granted visas on weekends, for instance, and in a few hours. And we have also a number of different mechanisms to speed up the visa process. For instance, for the World Cup, we had the World Cup visa, which was free of charge and was granted very fast. You just had to show that you had the hotel reservations, a ticket, and a round-trip ticket, and that was it. It was granted without charge. And so there are a lot of initiatives on our side to accommodate this, but I think it's important because it demands, you know how many Brazilians came to the United States last year?
No.
2 million. 2 million. They spent almost $11 billion in the United States, and they all had to have visas.
Oh, no,
and
yes.
Nobody out of these 2 million Brazilians, no one gave up the trip and thought was worth coming because of the visa. I think it's the same with the United States. And you know, during the World Cup, 200,000 tickets were sold in the United States for different games. No one stayed here, and no one didn't take part in the World Cup because of the visa. I think this is just a matter. It's a bureaucratic mechanism that cannot be simply suspended on our side.
Ambassador,
All right, thank you.
When you talk about flexibility, I know it's been a while you've been negotiating both governments. So can you give a clearer example of some of the issues so we can have more flexibility in the visa?
To the flexibility on our side to
on
grant
our
visa?
side, yeah.
Well, as I said, we receive urgent requests of visa for humanitarian reasons, for business reasons, for family reunion. Our consulates, we have 10 consulates in the United States, and they work very, very hard on this, and they are always ready to answer to those special requests, last-minute requests. Before coming here, was ambassador in Buenos Aires, and one day I met a very important and prominent American architect, and he told me that he was married to an European lady, and he told me that he was coming after Buenos Aires, visiting Brazil the next day, a Saturday. And then he was a very nice gentleman, very prominent, important architect. We exchanged cards, and Saturday around 8 in the evening, he called me. So I'm at the airport. I didn't know I need a visa. So very sorry. We'll try. He was very nervous, and his wife was European, and she didn't need a visa to go to Brazil. And of course, she left. She didn't miss the flight, and he stayed over. I said, "Don't worry, I'll take care of it." And I sent someone to the consulate. He took a cab from the airport back. We granted him immediately because I knew him. He had his ticket, he had the hotel reservation, and so on. And we granted him the visa immediately. And he left on a later flight. We have a lot of flights between Buenos Aires and Rio de Janeiro and São Paulo, and he left. So this is one of the good examples of flexibility. And we also have institutionally a number of different measures that the government, or instructions that the Foreign Ministry and the Ministry of Justice send us with relation to special events, for instance, big conferences like Rio Plus 20 or the World Summit in '92 and Rio Plus 20 2 years ago, or the World Cup or Net Mundial, the big conference.
So we need more flexibility from the U.S. side. What are the issues?
It's not. I think that the flexibility on our side is good. On the U.S. side, it was a terrible problem. Some visas were taken up to 3 months to be granted. And of course, the U.S. authorities realized that that was an impediment to the flow of tourists and to this flow of 2 million visitors and $11 billion spent in tourism in the United States, hotel, restaurants, shopping, and airline. And on top of that, airline tickets. And the American companies, they make a wonderful job in Brazil. There are so many flying to different destinations, and they make a lot of money.
Well, on that note, since we are talking about traveling and tourism and all that, nobody likes to connect in Houston or Dallas or Miami. So we have an announcement, and for that, I would like to invite Una Fena, International Business Development for the City of San Francisco, a new initiative that is called Latin SF. And I will invite Juliano Alves Pinto, Deputy Consul of the Brazilian Consulate. And so we are together announcing an initiative, a joint initiative, to start a campaign for a direct flight between San Francisco and São Paulo. This is just the start of a dialogue. We can make this happen. Well, actually, we can make it happen, we think, gathering support from you, from the business community. And we already have a lot of adopters. We had an event at Zendesk last Wednesday. Zendesk said it's already behind. Who else is behind this? So, and last night we created a very basic page on Facebook that is called SF-SP Direct, San Francisco, São Paulo Direct. Please go to our page, like our page. Let's start a dialogue. Right, Una?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Margarita. I work for the Mayor of San Francisco, and as Margarita said, this week we launched a new program to develop the business relationship between San Francisco and Latin America. We launched it in Mexico, but we're very glad to be here with all the Brazilians. And the Mayor's office is very much behind this effort to develop the connectivity between San Francisco, Bay Area, Silicon Valley, and Brazil. It's such an important connection for us, and we're very excited to partner with you on it. So please give us your support. It's probably a long process and something that will have to be a very strategic process, but we have to start here in this room, and let's hope it's very successful. Thank you.
Juliano?
Well, thank you, Margarita. Oh, sorry. Thank you, Margarita. Thank you, Una. Is it word? Thank you, Margarita. Thank you, Una, for the initiative. The consulate is fully committed to support this idea because the more connectivity, the more business we're going to have, the number of tourists is going to increase. So it's good for the region, good for San Francisco. It's already a city that Brazilians fell in love with for such a long time. We even have a soap opera on that was filmed or was shot here in San Francisco. So people are eager to come. So if you have a direct flight, everything is going to be much easier in the end. So this initiative is really great, and the consulate is ready to promote it as well. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Please invite your friends, like our page. Let's start the dialogue. Let's have this direct flight. Thank you so much, Ambassador.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ligia.